Hello, YouTube. Mr. Mags here. Most gym leaders have super iconic aces to the point where you could never even imagine them having any other Pokemon to represent them. But some other gym leaders, you think maybe they could have gotten away with using something a little better or something that just suits them a little better. So today, I thought it'd be fun to go over every single gym leader across the entire Pokemon franchise and determine if I think they should have had a new ace, and then, regardless of if I think they should have had a new ace, see what other Pokemon I think would fit them. So, let's get right into the criteria for how I created these new ace Pokemon for these gym leaders. First, the new ace Pokemon must be of their type specialty or theme. The vast majority of these trainers have specific type specialties that they use, although some others, because there's a very small, in certain instances, there's a very small group of Pokemon to have to choose from, or they just have some other theming that I think would work for this Pokemon. I might have to branch out a little bit, but the vast majority of them, I am picking a different Pokemon of the type they specialize in, ideally one that is from the region that they are the gym leader of. The new ace must be a Pokemon that has never been this gym leader's ace during an initial gym battle. There have been a couple of gym leaders where through remakes or like third versions like Platinum or whatever, um, their ace has changed. And I thought it'd be fun to take all of that into account. And, if they have two or three aces they've used as specific first gym leader encounters, I'm saying creating a brand new ace outside of those. Although I am not including the Kanto gym fights in the Johto games. I will be including Janine and Blue specifically since they are new to those games. But like Blaine, Lieutenant Surge, etc., any other gym leader that does have a new ace in the Kanto fights in the Johto games, it's a little confusing, but I just decided since those are post game, it just doesn't really. I felt like that would be a little muddy to include those as well. The new ace will be determined independent of any other canon trainers. This is just, and also, independent of each other as well. So, for example, if I think that Claire should have a Dragonite, it doesn't really matter that Lance would also have a Dragonite. I feel like that'd be a little too limiting to, you know, to do it that way. Plus, let's say I think that Byron should have a Lucario because it is another steel type. I'm not gonna say, oh, you can't have a Lucario just because Maylene has a Lucario because I'm also in this reality changing her ace anyway. I didn't do either of those, but that's just an example of this. I'll be using the version of the region with the most options. So, for example, Platinum for Sinnoh and Legend CA for Kalos to bring in any Mega Evolutions introduced in that game as well. Just to give myself the most options possible. And the new ace will be similar in strength to their current ace. However, the gym order may change if necessary to accommodate exceptions to this rule specifically. As I said up top, there are a couple of instances where there is a very, very small amount of Pokemon to even choose from within the region. And since I like to pick Pokemon specifically introduced in that region in question, if I feel the only other option or an option that I think just fits in super well is like it has to be either earlier or later, I'll note that and and add that Pokemon where it makes sense. But the vast majority of the cases, I looked at the base stat total of the current ace and tried to match that as close as I could, given the limitations of the regional decks. Hope that makes sense, and I think it'll make even more sense as we go. So, starting off with Kanto. Starting off with the one that started it all, we have Brock with his super iconic Onyx. Now, obviously, Onyx fits in super well. I kind of like it when a gym leader can use a single stage, at least as far as that game is concerned, a single stage Pokemon and it still be super intimidating. It is a little unfortunate that Onyx had to get nerfed quite a bit in order to accommodate it being the first gym leader's ace. If it weren't, fought as a first gym, I guarantee it would have a much higher attack stat because currently 45 is absolutely criminal. Um, it would have at least 60 or maybe even 70 plus if it were caught later on. But regardless, I think Onyx fits him super well. The only other Pokemon in the region that I thought even made sense, like maybe you could go with one of the fossils, but I just felt like that didn't really work here for me personally. So I went with Rhyhorn. Um, Rhyhorn would probably get a similar treatment to Onyx. Rhyhorn has a frankly pretty high attack stat for a first stage Pokemon. It is super slow and has really bad special stats and kind of middling HP, so it doesn't have as much bulk as a yeah, I think you could get away with it being a the first gym leader's ace because of that, but maybe they would lower its attack slightly just to make it a little more manageable. But I still think Rhyhorn is probably the best option to go with here. Next, Misty, we have Starmie, another super iconic ace. I can't really imagine her with anyone else. But if I had to pick something, I think it would be cool to go with a different Waterstone evolution in Cloyster. There are a couple of different Pokemon that could have worked here, some that are even closer to its base stat total, with Gyarados being around there. Vaporeon could have also worked with the Waterstone evolution. Um, but I think Cloyster kind of fits a vibe that I really like with gym leader aces specifically, where they're just super bulky and hard to take down, especially in Generation 1 when its special stats were the same. I believe it has a 90 a special attack and or special stat in that generation. So on top of its 180 defense stat, it also has a pretty solid special defense stat as well. So especially at that point in the game, you know, I think Cloyster could be pretty hard to take down. It's not nearly as fast as Starmie, so I think there's certain things there that make Starmie better, but Cloyster I still think fits overall pretty well. Like I said, there are other Pokemon even outside of Stone evolutions. Gyarados, Golduck could also fit here well. Seaking, maybe I could get you can get away with that. Definitely not as strong, but this thing it fits her vibe well. Next up, Lieutenant Surge, we have Raichu. Pretty solid ace. I personally have always felt like Electabuzz overall fit him pretty well, and they agreed uh, in the Johto games, his gym battle, they do give him Electabuzz as his ace, and I kind of like that better. Like I said, I do kind of like it when a gym leader is able to use a single stage Pokemon, especially in the earlier gyms, as their ace. And as at the time, Electabuzz was a single stage Pokemon, so I think Electabuzz fits here very well. But if you do think that I should ignore the Kanto fights in the Johto games. Magneton or Voltorb or Electrode. Yeah, Electrode could also work here. Probably Magneton would work the best. Next, Erica, we have Vileplume, super iconic. Couldn't really imagine her with anyone else, but in red, blue, and yellow, and or I guess red and blue, and then Leaf Green, Fire Red. Actually, technically, her Vileplume and Victory Bell are both on the same level as kind of dual aces. In any instances like this, I will only show the Pokemon that they send out last. There's at least one other instance of this where they have two Pokemon that are on the same level, but one is kind of more so considered their ace since they send it out last. But so for the purposes of this video, Vileplume is the ace, and I'm switching that with Victory Bell, which again, just like with Misty, I like being able to alternate between stone evolutions. I just like that vibe. For Koga is an interesting case where both Venomoth and Weezing fit him fine enough. I just feel like there's not really a specific poison type in that generation that like really works for him. I almost feel like he would work better as a bug specialist and have Scyther as his ace. Like I kind of like the idea of, smoke bombs being a ninja tool, so Weezing fits pretty well there. And Venomoth is fine. I've never really loved it as his ace, but as far as at that point in the game, Weezing is fine enough. I just feel like of the Pokemon that are in Kanto, nothing fits him super well. but I feel like Muck is the obvious counterpart to Weezing, so I went with that here. But I think Tentacruel could also work super well as well. Um, I think I think Muck is a like better counterpart to Weezing for the purposes of this video, but I think Tentacruel, especially at that point in the game, kind of would maybe be more iconic to him because there's a couple of trainers along the way, either in Silphco or on the cycling road trainers, where there's actually some bikers and people like that who use Weezing and Muck on their teams before you even get to Koga. So by the time you get to him, Weezing feels a little mundane, whereas Tentacruel, I don't really know of any trainers you would have access to at that point that would use Tentacruel, especially since you don't have access to Surf yet. So there's a good chance that you wouldn't even see one. So I think Tentacruel works better actually overall. Sabrina, Alakazam, perfect, iconic, one of the single most iconic aces of any gym leader of all time. The thing is a menace. I couldn't imagine her with anything else, but if I had to give her something, it would be Executor. Executor actually has a slightly higher base stat total. It is weaker to a lot of other things, as opposed to Alakazam in that game really being only weak to Bug. Like, it should have been weak to Lick, but even then, Lick isn't that strong. So, Executor is weak to a lot of other things. So, it wouldn't be nearly as hard to take down, especially since it is slower. But I still think Executor having an incredibly high base stat total and just it still has a decent chance of taking at least one hit, even though it does have more weaknesses. So I think that makes sense. Blaine with Arcanine, that's great. Um, it is like slightly undercut with but both with Alakazam as well, but the fact that Blue has both potentially has both Arcanine and Alakazam on his team, but regardless, you fight this Arcanine first, so it's a very good ace for him. Um, yeah, I don't really think there's like a need to change him, but if you had to change it, I think Rapidash works just as well. I was kind of between Rapidash and Ninetales. I just feel like Rapidash suits his vibe a little better. Even though Ninetales is kind of Arcanine counterpart, Ninetales is not nearly as strong as Arcanine for some reason. Whereas Rapidash, I feel, is closer to to Arcanine's vibe overall. And again, they agreed since in the Johto games, they did give him Rapidash as his ace in his gym fights. And lastly, Giovanni, Rhydon, perfect. It's, I think again a very, very iconic Pokemon for him. Um, I didn't put this here, but maybe I should have the fact that he technically has Rhyhorn as his ace in Leaf Green Fire Red. I'll never understand that. I've gone on record saying that is one of the single weirdest decisions that Game Freak has ever made. But regardless, Rhydon is his ace. But if you were to switch it, Nidoking works just as well in yellow. Uh, he actually does another instance of having two Pokemon at the same level of 55, with Rhydon going last, but Nidoking is still kind of his secondary ace. Nidoqueen could also work here since in the Silphco fight, Nidoqueen is his ace there. So basically, I would want a ground type that kind of is shaped like that. But Nidoking is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon, and I think just vibe-wise, it fits right on the best. And like I said, I am doing the ones introduced in the Johto games with Janine. Um, Venomoth, there's something kind of poetic about her using one of Koga's aces, but at the same time, it does kind of undercut her uniqueness just to have her ace be one that Koga used in the previous game, that being yellow at this point. So it's fine, but I do feel like either Nidoqueen or once again Tentacruel would just kind of make her a little more unique. Um, maybe just because, Nidoqueen is the female counterpart to Nidoking, but and Janine is a girl, so I think it overall works pretty well there. But again, Tentacruel also fits here, I think. And lastly, for Kanto, we have Blue. Now, in uh, Gold, Silver, Crystal, technically speaking, he has three different Pokemon that can kind of be considered his ace. He has an Exeggutor, a Gyarados, and an Arcanine. I believe he sends up Arcanine last, and they're all on level 58 in the initial fight. And that's to kind of, reference the revolving Pokemon that he can use uh, instead of the starter Pokemon in his champion fights. So that's pretty cool. But since they're all on the same level, and I wasn't really sure exactly which one like the game would consider his ace, I decided to go with the Heart Gold Soul Silver blue fight where he does in fact have Pidgeot as his actual ace. Now I'm fine with him having Pidgeot on the team. It's his, it is pretty iconic too. Blue overall, it's the second Pokemon he ever catches and fights you with. So it is a Pokemon that leads his champion fight and also leads his gym fights in Gold, Silver, Crystal. But making it his ace Pokemon, I never really liked that, especially since it kind of undercuts Faulkner's uniqueness. Granted, Faulkner should have had a different ace anyway, but regardless, in those rematches in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, having two different gym leaders have the same ace Pokemon, I always found that a little weird. So, to remedy this, I think I'm going to do something that I think they should have just done anyway and have him have Tyranitar as his ace. It's crazy to me that throughout the entire journey of Kanto, not a, or, sorry, the Johto games, not a single trainer even has a Tyranitar. Not Karen, not Lance, not your rival, and not Blue. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they gave him Tyranitar in the Leaf Green Fire Red Champion rematch fights, as well as his rematches in Heart Gold Soul Silver. But I've just always liked the idea of him having Tyranitar. So, especially since in his champion fight in Leaf Green Fire Red, he doesn't even use Pidgeot anymore. He actually switches it out for a Heracross and switches out Rhydon for Tyranitar. So, clearly Tyranitar worked for him very well. Not that Pidgeot doesn't work. Like I said, it is something kind of cool about like the first Pokemon he actually catches be his ace, but I think Tyranitar just fits Blue's vibe super well. Next up, Johto. Now, I had a lot of very positive things to say about the Kanto aces for the most part. There were a couple that were like slightly questionable, but overall, I think that is one of the most, if not the most solid group of aces, period. Johto is one of the worst. There are a lot of these that I'm going to heavily disagree with. So, Johto, with Faulkner here, I've gone on record saying that Faulkner's team is one of my least favorite teams in the entire franchise. Having Pidgey and then Pidgeotto as the ace is crazy to me. Like there, it's not like there's zero flying types to go off of. Like there's not like it's not an overwhelming amount to pick from, but there are some you could have picked, but instead you picked Pidgeotto, who is one of the most prolific Pokemon to fight in all of Kanto. So I really don't know why they gave him Pidgeotto as his ace. It should have been something like a Murkrow. I could also hear arguments for Natu. I could also maybe hear arguments for an underleveled Noctowl. Noctowl is actually a good bit stronger than Pidgeotto, so maybe that wouldn't work. But either Natu or Murkrow, I think could work here very well. Next, Bugsy. I really do like Scyther here. Ideally, it would be a Pokemon that is actually from a Johto, but Scyther does evolve into a Johto Pokemon. Plus, Scyther didn't get a lot of love in the Kanto games anyway, so I'm fine with it being Scyther here. The only other Pokemon that I feel in the Johto decks that is a bug type that even kind of fits Scyther's vibe is Heracross. They're kind of counterparts. Obviously, uh, Heracross is more directly a counterpart to Pinsir, but Pinsir and Scyther are were counterparts at the time. So since they both had that 500 base stat total, I do think Heracross would be a little more difficult to take down this early on. Scyther just has a lot more weaknesses, a lot more common weaknesses. He even has that four times weakness to rock, whereas Heracross, yeah, he has that four times weakness to flying, which I guess is pretty common, but no weakness to rock. And there are basically no fire type options outside of your starter at that point. So Heracross would just be a little more challenging to take down. So maybe I could argue maybe he should go like maybe fifth or sixth just to make Heracross stand out a little more. But yeah, this is kind of why I think Scyther is the best pick for him. But if he were to be a later gym, I would definitely say, yeah, Heracross works here. For Whitney, um, Miltank, again, one of the most iconic uh, gym aces throughout the entire franchise. I could not imagine her with anyone else. But if you did have to give her something else, I actually picked two different options here. One that I personally prefer with Giraffe. I like the idea of her ace being something that's not weak to fighting and in fact is actually super effective into fighting. So if you plan to try to steamroll her with a fighting type, you can't do that since her ace is a psychic type. But I think Blissey actually kind of fits Miltank's vibe very well as well. It's, it's round in a similar way. It's pink like Whitney likes. It has absolutely insane bulk like Miltank. The main difference is that Miltank obviously hits a lot harder and is a good bit faster. Um, and if you do hit Blissey with any fighting move, it goes down immediately. So it definitely would be a different challenge, but if you're not prepared in a specific way, Blissey could be super annoying. Next up, Morty with his Gengar. There isn't really another option for him. Like Mischievous is the only other ghost type outside of, I guess, technically Hisui and Typhlosion. But yeah, Mischievous is the only other option for him. He should have had one on his team just at somewhere, instead of maybe the second Haunter, give him a Mischievous. But regardless, Mischievous is the only other option for him. But I think like overall, I guess Gengar is the best choice here, but maybe he should have gone a little earlier just to have Mischievous. Like, I think second or third, maybe even first even. I think Mischievous could stand out a little better if he went a little earlier. Next, Chuck, Poliwrath. I kind of like go back and forth on if I even like Poliwrath on his team. Poliwrath isn't used significantly on any tr major trainers in the Kanto games, so it's more or less fine in similar way that Scyther was more or less fine on Bugsy's team. But I would definitely have preferred him having a Johto fighting type as his ace, like with Hitmontop. Heracross could also very easily work here. I didn't put Heracross as a slide for him, but Heracross could also very easily work here, especially um, if you feel like Bugsy should have something else earlier on, like maybe even like I don't know exactly what that would be, since I feel like most of the other bug types are way too weak to be gym aces. But regardless, Hitmontop, works just as well here, but Heracross could also work as his ace. At least I think overall a little better than Poliwrath. Price, Pilot's one is fine. It's definitely the strongest ice type in the region, so that's fine with it being his ace. But I actually made two different, potential aces for him. The first one actually being technically a Kanto Pokemon with Jinx. It has a very similar base type to level 2 Pilot's one. It actually hits harder and is a little faster, but it also does evolve from a Johto Pokemon. So it's not ideal, but since it at least does have some kind of connection to a Johto Pokemon, like with Bugsy Scyther, I'd be more or less okay with him having Jinx here. But I think it'd be even better if Price and Bugsy basically switch places and have Price have a Sneasel as his ace and move Bugsy up to the sixth gym. And I am saying that Price here is the sixth gym leader. I've always personally kind of viewed Jasmine as more of a seventh gym leader. I feel like she's just overall a little more impressive as a gym leader. Since you can find them in any order, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I'm just saying for the record that I think Chuck should be fifth, Price should be sixth, and Jasmine seventh. So you either keep him as the sixth gym leader and give him Jinx, or have him move to the second gym give him Sneasel and have Bugsy be the sixth gym with Heracross. I think that could work just as well. And lastly, Jasmine. Steelix is a very, very iconic ace for her. I dig it a lot. But if you were to switch it out for something else, I think Scizor would be a very cool swap here. It's the only other Pokemon to evolve with a metal coat, has a very similar base stat total, so I think that works. Now for Claire. So Claire is one of those where I said I had to kind of make an exception with, to kind of go more based on theme as opposed to actually her type specialty. Because the only dragon type options available are Kingdra and Dragonite. And I know I said I made these teams independent of other trainers, but Dragonite is, I think, a little too strong for a gym leader ace. There are a couple of instances where I feel like pseudo legendary can work in a pinch. Now you'll see those a couple of times throughout this list, but the vast majority of the time I'm gonna try to avoid using pseudo legendaries if possible. And yes, there aren't any other dragon types introduced in Johto, but there are a couple of Pokemon introduced in Johto that do have mega evolutions that are dragon type. So I decided to, give her one of those. And I think the most logical choice is for Alligator. Um, you know, she clearly has a bias for blue draconic water types with Kingdra and Gyarados, and then the two Dragonairs are also blue. So I think Feraligatr fits that vibe super well. It obviously wouldn't mega evolve at this point, but clearly it has a very similar vibe to something like Gyarados. So that works here. But if you do feel weird about her having a starter Pokemon, which I completely understand and even kind of agree with, um, Ampharos is the only other even like kind of close option here. I would be, very open to hearing other suggestions down below for any of these, actually. I should have said that up top, but if at any point you disagree or think, there could be a better option as opposed to the one I picked, please let me know. But since Feraligatr and Ampharos both in later games have mega evolutions that become part dragon, and Ampharos isn't on any other major trainer teams, I think it works here. Plus, its Japanese name it can be translated as Thunder Dragon. So there you go. All right, moving on to Hoenn. So, Roxanne. Nose Pass is fine. It's one of those quintessential Hoenn, just super, super hard to take down gym leader aces. That's kind of a thing with Hoenn specifically that I really, really like, where especially in Ruby Sapphire Emerald, a lot of their aces are just super beefy and just they can't hit super hard, but they are impossible to take down. And that is definitely this nose best. So I think that is definitely the best option for her, but I picked two alternatives. I definitely like one more than the other, but you'll still see. So I think the most logical choice if you had to pick one from Hoenn is Aron. Um, it's it's not the best choice. It actually has a closer base out total with nose pass than you might think, but it being the ace of a rock gym leader and not being weak to grass is a little unfortunate. I think that early on it'd be a little unfair to the player to, not basically not have access to any fighting types outside of the trade Makuhita, no ground types outside of I don't even know what like outside of Marsh or I guess Mud Slap with Mudkip. Um, like if you didn't pick Mudkip, this would be super hard to take down, assuming you're working with level caps. You can't even get a Combuskin at this point. So yeah, I think Aron it works well enough as a pretty good, hard to take down ace for her, but it would maybe be a little unfair with that steel typing. So another kind of logical choice, I think, is Corsola. I know that Corsola isn't a Hoenn Pokemon, but there are several different Pokedex entries that kind of heavily imply that it maybe originated from Hoenn in its Johto Pokedexes that mentioned that, in faraway lands, there's entire cities built on top of Corsola. And then when you get to Hoenn, Pacific Town is built on top of Corsola. So I feel like Corsola was, it was introduced in Johto, but there's a decent chance that it actually originated from Hoenn. Plus, Corsola didn't get any love at all in the Johto game, so I'm more or less fine with it. I'm definitely more fine with this than something like Magneton and Watson's team, who we'll get to. But since Magneton is way overexposed and Corsola basically used nowhere, I think this would be overall fine enough. Obviously, Nose Pass is the best choice here. Brawly, Makuhita is one of the few cases where it's a pre-evolved Pokemon that is like actually really hard to take down. Like I know it can only really work as the second gym leader. At any other point, in this process, Makuhita would, first or second, there's no other place this could be where it could even be kind of a challenge. But as the second gym, you don't really have a lot of good options for second and flying type moves. And even if you do have some good moves, like it has a good enough bulk where it's gonna take at least a couple hits to take down. So I think it works here. The only other option for a second gym ace for him would be Meditite. It has, with that pure power ability, if it is given some kind of fighting move, maybe hidden power fighting or even focus punch like his Meditite does in Emerald, it could, it could, you know, hit pretty hard. I don't absolutely love this for him, so I actually went with two other options. One is if you made him the fifth gem and just evolved his Makuhita into a Hariyama. I think that makes sense. Um, but I could easily hear, given the rules I set up, if you think that would be a little bit of a cop out, I understand that. Plus, I even like him better with Breloom at the third gym more anyway. I almost said that Breloom could work as the second gym ace, but it would be a little too underleveled, and Breloom having that 130 base attack. Like if you did give it Mach Punch, that would be, I think, a little unfair. So the third gym, I think, is out in my head. I've always just really liked the idea of Breloom being a third gym ace anyway, and this is the best place to do that. Next up, Watson. Like I said before, Magneton, Disgrace. One of my least favorite choices Game Freak has ever made, giving Watson a Magneton as his ace. I know there weren't a ton of other options in Hoenn to choose from, but Magneton was not the choice. I don't know why they did that. And they agree, since in Emerald they gave him a Nectric instead. Much better choice. It is a little underleveled, but it doesn't have like an astronomical uh, special attack stat. I think it was only 95, actually lower than Magneton's, who was also underleveled at that point. So it's fine that Magnetric is his ace. But like I said, there aren't a ton of other electric type options in the region. Literally, the only other new electric types added in Hoenn are Plusle and Ninen. So I think it'd be kind of cool for the purposes of this video to say that the double battle that you fight in a gym battle is actually Watson's in the second position. Yeah, since this is the only option and Plusle and Ninen, are intended to fight together anyway, I think this is fun. Next up, Flannery, Torkoal, very iconic for her. I don't see, again, a reason to switch it out for anything, but if you had to, Camerupt is kind of the only other choice. I don't know why this region introduced a very, very small number of both fire and electric types, but Camerupt would work just as well. The only other choice would be Blaziken, and obviously we're not using Blaziken. I guess technically you could say you could use Primal Groudon, but we're not doing that either. I guess also kind of cast form sometimes, but again, that's just a little too complicated. We're just going to do Camerupt. Norman. Slacking is amazing here. Obviously, it's very underleveled, but it's fine. It's fine. I don't love that he has two different slacking on his team. I don't love that his team is entirely just one line of Pokemon, but slacking is a very, very good roadblock for like that point in the game. It's like after you beat him, you're ready for the rest, for the end game. So I really like Slaking. I felt the only other choice would be an underleveled Exploud. It's the only other one, only other normal type that's even kind of close to the same base stat total. I think Exploud should honestly even be a little stronger. If it were made now, it would have a much higher special attack stat. It would have probably a good bit higher HP as well. So I think Exploud is the only other real choice here, but Slaking, I think, is the right choice. Winona was interesting because Altaria, super iconic to her. I could not imagine her with anyone else. It is the perfect ace for that point in the game. But then I was looking at other flying types, and there really weren't any other good options for a sixth gem. The closest I could see is Tropius, but I just didn't really feel like Tropius worked as the ace of a sixth gem. So I'm actually saying that she should have Tropius, but she should move down to the third gem. Have Brawly move up to sixth, I guess. Yeah, have Brawly move up to sixth. If I said fifth before, I meant sixth. Brawly move up to sixth. Have Winona move down to third, and have Watson move to second. I think that would work overall pretty well. Um, Tropius, once again, just kind of feels like that kind of Pokemon where it doesn't hit super hard, but it is really bulky. It would be pretty hard to take down as a third gym. So I like that. I think Altaria fits her better, but Tropius at a third gym, I think would work just as well. Tate and Liza with Soul Rock and Lunatone, very iconic. It's a little unfortunate that in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire they kind of got nerfed by just the very nature of power creep, since there are just a ton of new options to fight them with. They didn't really keep up with uh, the new Mega evolutions, the new Steel, Water, Dark, just a bunch of new moves and stuff at the players, at the player's disposal. But in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, this was a very formidable duo, and I couldn't really see them with anyone else. But if we are going off of Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Gallade and Gardevoir is the perfect choice here. It's very annoying that they never had any kind of rematch in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Otherwise, I guarantee they would have had Gallade and Gardevoir, and then ideally like Slowbro and Slowking, or maybe two Meowsticks or something like that, just to keep the duos going. But yeah, is another iconic duo of psychic types, both technically kind of in the Oras Pokedex. So yeah, I think that works super well. But if you're going off of just Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, you take it where it's just one of them. I'm picking Liza here with Gardevoir. Yeah, I know that Gardevoir is Wally's iconic ace, but yeah, we're assuming he either has something else or doesn't exist, and Liza has Gardevoir. Next, we have Wallace with his Milotic. I think that's perfect. I agree in theory with Milotic being like on the level of being a Elite Four ace Pokemon. I don't necessarily agree with him with Milotic being a Champions ace. It's good, but it's like I don't know. It always felt a little weird as as like the final Pokemon, especially after you fought a pseudo legendary as the as Drake's ace. But regardless, Milotic is a very, very good Pokemon that I couldn't really see him with anyone else. But if you had to pick something else for him, I think Walrein works well here as a similar base stat total. We're assuming that Glaceon would have something else or didn't exist. So yeah, I think that works. Ludicolo, I was also kind of thinking about that as well. It has a good bit lower base stat total, but I think it has a similar kind of bulk and just, and actually is very similar special defense and special attack stat as Milotic. So um, yeah, I think it could still challenge the player in a similar way that Milotic can. And lastly, for Hoenn, we have Juan with Kingdra. I've never liked this Kingdra. Not only is it a weird double team rest set, I don't know why they did that, but also it's Claire's ace. So I don't know. Like, there's a good amount of water types in Hoenn to pick from, and they just picked a different gym leader's ace. I always found that weird. So I'm giving a Wailord. I think he always should have had Wailord. It is bizarre to me that he doesn't. Like, I know that Wallace also uses Wailord, but I think that there's something kind of cool about Wallace using the ace of a gym leader on his team as a champion. I think that would have been kind of cool, but regardless, Wailord just works so well here. Next up, Sinnoh. Now, Rourke, I couldn't imagine him with anyone other than Kranos, especially since there aren't very many other rock types in the region. The only other ones are Probopass, Bastiodon, and Bonsly. And I was found I didn't quite think that Sudowoodo worked here. So of those options, the only other one that I think even kind of makes sense is just giving him Shieldon, especially since I am switching out Byron's ace for something else. I think just switching him out for a different fossil, I think that works. Gardenia, Roserade fits her super well. Um, yeah, I don't think you would need to switch her out for anything else, but if you were to give her a different ace, I think Leafeon works. There aren't that many other good grass types introduced in this region anyway, so especially since uh, the mossy rock that is used to evolve Leafeon is literally in Eterna Forest right next to her. I think that'd be kind of fun world building to get to her. You fight her Leafeon, and then later when you get an Eevee, you're like, oh, you know, she had a Leafeon. Maybe there's somewhere near Eterna City where I could get a Leafeon, and there you go. I really like that a lot. Um, yeah, I like that. Crasher Wake. Floatzel, great choice for him. Again, there aren't that many other good water types in the region to pick from, so Floatzel is about as good as you can do. So because of that, I'm actually going to make a kind of insane choice. I'm going to give him Fione. Now, Fione is one of my all-time least favorite Pokemon. I don't really know why it even exists. It, I really don't know what they were thinking when they were even making this thing. But it does exist. It is a Gen 4 Pokemon. It is arguably not a mythical Pokemon. And there's something kind of cool about a gym leader using a Pokemon that the player doesn't really have access to. And since the only other really, the only other water type options are like Lumineon, Barrel, like nothing else really worked for me. So I'm gonna say you can have Fione. Like, it's definitely not good enough to really have mythical status. So yeah, I could easily hear arguments against this, but just for the fun of it, I'm doing Fione. Next up, Maylene, and again for the purposes of this video, just like with Price of Jasmine, I'm saying that you fight Crasher Wake first and then Maylene. I know in Platinum you fight Maylene first and then Crasher Wake, but I'm saying this the other way. Just I don't know. I feel like the choices that I made for these different aces it just flows a little better this way. But in Diamond and Pearl, you can fight them in either order. So I'm saying this is the canon order for the purposes of this video. Lucario works super well. Couldn't really imagine her with anyone else. It is, probably the most iconic Sinnoh Pokemon, so it should be on a major trainer team like this. But if you were to switch her out for something else, Toxicroak also makes sense. Has a similar base stat total, it's a similar speed and attacking stats. So yeah, it would be slightly under level depending on the level you fight her at, but that's fine. Next up, Fantina, Miss Mismachius, super iconic to her. I wouldn't see a need to switch her out for anything else. And even though she is literally dressed like a Driftbloom, I think Dusknoir makes the most sense here. I like the idea of it being a different previous gen Pokemon that got a ghost type evolution in Sinnoh. So yeah, Dusknoir. It's also a Pokemon that doesn't get any love anywhere else. So I think it fits here. Byron with Bastiodon, just like with Rourke, I don't think you should switch them out. I really like the idea of them both having the fossils. Since they are related, I like that symmetry there. But if you were to switch it out, I think switching it out for a different rock steel type with Probopass, even though I really, really do not like Probopass, I think it is the most logical choice if you were to switch it. Next, with Candace, we have both Abomasnow and Froslash, depending on the game. Both of these are very solid aces. I think Frostlass fits her overall a little better. Definitely fits her strategy better since since with that has that snow cloak ability and not being weak to fighting is also very cool as an ice type ace. So I don't think you should, give her anything else, but if you were, Glaceon, I think works well. Just like with Leafeon in Eterna City, since Glaceon, the place to evolve it is just below where you fight Candace. I think it's a very good world building that, she trains in the area and it just naturally evolves. So there you go. Volkner, Luxray, and Electivire. I like Electivire for him a little better, although I think his actual coloring is closer to that of Luxray, so both fit him well. You I think Luxray, kind of like with Lucian having a Bronzong, I think it's a little weird that they waited this long to give a major trainer a Pokemon like that, but it's still actually deceptively pretty strong. And Electivire definitely fits well as a final ace, but if you were to give him something else, Magnezone works just as well. I also considered Magnezone for Byron, but since Protopass works super well there, Magnezone's up for grabs here. Next up, Unova. First, we have Silent, Chili, and Cress. And at first, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with this. Like maybe I should do something kind of cheeky and give them all a bunch of different dark types to kind of reference the fact they may or may not be the Shadow Triad or something like that. But um, I did end up deciding, yeah, I should just give them a different fire, grass, water type that's not a starter Pokemon. I know I've seen other videos like this where they just give them starter Pokemon. I don't really agree with that personally. So since there are at least three fire, grass, water types that have around 330-ish base out total, I just gave them those. So Silent has Deerling, Chili has Darumaka, and then Cress. I went with Frillish here. I I could easily hear arguments for it being a ghost type, being a little unfair for this early in the game, since most of the moves you have access to are normal type moves. I could easily hear a ghost type being super early is a little unfair. So if you think that Ducklet also has a similar base out total, so I think that could also work. Next up, Lenora. I've never liked Watchog as her ace. It is kind of deceptively strong and fast for that point in the game, but it just really just never felt like a ace Pokemon to me. So I went with two different options here. One I think fits her better, but the other I think would be a little more fair. The first choice being Bouffalant. Obviously, Bouffalant, I think, is probably a little too strong for this point. It does actually have a lower base set total than something like Starmie at the second gym in Kanto, but Starmie doesn't hit nearly as hard. It doesn't have nearly as high bulk as Bouffalant does. Bouffalant is a good bit slower, and since you are given, stuff like Throw, Sock, and Timber, in the route surrounding it. So you do, and Roggenrola, I think you also have access to it at this point. So you have stuff to counter it. I would just maybe understand if they think that Buffon would be a little too strong for this point. So I went with Audino as a potential alternate. Audino definitely cannot hit super hard, but it is incredibly bulky. And if it knows a wish, it could just, or some of the recovery move, it could just continually will you down while, basically just reviving any damage it takes and you know, basically death by 1,000 cuts you until you're gone. So I think that's cool. I definitely think that Buffon fits her overall vibe a little better, but Audino, I think, could also work as an ace at a second gym, but definitely no later than that. Next, Berg. Leaveney fits him fine enough. It's another one of those aces that I think is good for the point of the game that it's at. If it were like maybe get away with being fourth gym, but fifth gym later, I don't think Leaveney could really cut it. But I think as an ace of a as a third gem, it works fine enough. But when trying to determine what other bug type I think fits Berg the best, I think Excelgor is actually the best pick here. If for no other reason than Berg's outfit literally looks like it was based on Excelgor anyway. You got those stripes. Some of the stripes are different color, but he still has the green, the red, the black accents as well. I just feel like I don't know if it was intentional, but I still feel like there's elements of Berg of his design that just fit Excelgor super well. Plus, Excelgor is one of those Pokemon that doesn't have a level that it evolves. It evolves in a special way, so I also consider something like Galvantula, but that would be severely underleveled. Scolipede would be too strong and definitely underleveled for this point. So I think Excelgor, even though it is incredibly fast, there's not a lot you can get to that point that can outspeed Leaveney anyway. So yeah, I think Excelgor is a pretty cool pick here. Next, Elisa, Zebstrika fits her fine enough. Uh, Yeah, I don't really have any notes there. Like it's a pretty solid ace. I don't really think you should give her anything else. But if you were, Electros is just one of those Pokemon that I think is just screaming to be the ace of somebody in Black and White. And it is on Gets's team, but by that point, I feel like it's definitely not in like a special position like it would be here. So plus it would kind of fit with the rest of her team being two Emolgas. So her entire team would be immune to ground type Pokemon. I really like that. Like you volt switch in and out of Pokemon and just continually, you know, even if you are facing a Pokemon that, that would be super effective against you with like a ground move. Let's say it hit you with Smackdown, um, and the next turn it tends to hit you with a ground move. It just volt switches into a different Pokemon that's immune to ground, and I think that's a kind of fun loop there. Clay, Excadrill, one of the most iconic aces, especially in Black and White. So I don't think you definitely shouldn't go with anything else. But if you were to go with something else, I think Crocodile is the most logical other choice. I think they have a similar vibe, and Crocodile is another one of those that just it's weird that it's not actually the ace of any major trainer. It's on the Elite Fours team, but it weirdly is not as ace in with Bisharp instead, which is fine, but I think Crocodile deserves that a little more. Next with Skyla, I've never liked Swanna. Just as a Pokemon, it's one of my lesser favorites, but especially as an ace, after Zebstrika and Excadrill, Swanna just feels like a dip in momentum. So I think in order to get momentum back, you bring out Braviary. I know it's under leveled, but so is Haxorus on Drayden's team. So, you know, I think Braviary, I've in my head as one of those things where I've always just associated her with Braviary anyway, even though it's not actually really on her team ever. I just definitely feel like it would just overall work better than, you know, as a six gem ace, way more than Swanna. Next, Bryson, Beartic, pretty solid. It definitely would have been better in later gens after they buffed its attack stat by 20 points. And it was only 110 before, and now it's 130. So even in black and white, it's still a pretty solid ace for him. I think Vanilluxe could work just as well. Um, Yeah, either works well here, especially in my ideal version of these games where you are scaling up the levels of the gym leader aces to the point where Vanilluxe would be illegal. Vanilluxe, I think at 42. I think that'd be fine. And lastly, Drayden. Haxorus, amazing. You know, possibly the single highest. Yeah, I can't think of anything to refute this. The single highest attacking stat of any gym leader ace that's not a mega, period. I guess, yeah, I think it's everybody. Yeah. I can't think of any single gym leader ace that has a higher attacking stat than 147. Like that's higher than most, if not all Elite Four member aces. Because I know Chandelure has 145 special attack. There's a couple of pseudo legendaries, but they usually cap out around 135. Yeah, that's crazy. Like The only saving grace for this thing is the fact that its signature move being Dragon Tail has negative priority, so you know you at least have a chance to outspeed it and hit it with something. So that's an amazing ace for him. The only other options are Druddigon and Hydreigon. And since Haxorus was under leveled anyway, I'm giving him Hydreigon. Um, Ironically, Hydreigon actually hits up slightly weaker than Haxorus. Hydreigon only has 125 special attack. It does have a little more bulk, and I think is actually slightly slower. I mean, I think it's 1 point faster. Haxorus has 97 speed. Hydreigon has 98 speed, so it's basically negligible at that point. But I imagine he would still be using Dragon Tail a good bit of the time anyway. So Hydreigon would definitely be a menace at this point, but I don't necessarily know if it will be more menacing than Haxorus was. So yeah, I think that's justifiable. Now moving on to the Black and White 2 gym leaders. Sharon, I like the idea of Sharon being a gym leader, but I have never, ever liked him with Lillipup as his ace. It's crazy to me that there are literally gym trainers in his gym that use Lillipup, and then you turn around and just have him have his ace be Lillipup. I, I don't know why they did that. Like, this Lillipup is actually like a I think it has I think I remember correctly, it has a plus attack nature with a really good attacking IVs. So yeah, I actually have kind of struggled against the Lillipup before, especially if is able to get up some workups. But it is still very underwhelming, just the fact that it is a Lillipup. I think another normal type like Minccino, it is still unevolved, but it's at least more unique to him. I think that could have worked a little better here. Yeah, it is. I just think that would. I've always felt like that would work better. Next, Roxy. Whirlipede's in a kind of unfortunate situation where, for whatever reason, they decided to make Roxy the second gym, and then every good poison type they could have pulled from is much later. And with that, I mean Scolipede. For whatever reason, uh, they didn't have Roxy be a later gym leader and have Scolipede be the ace. At one point, I considered like basically shifting everybody around and having Roxy be like the fourth or fifth gym and having Scolipede be your ace, but I decided against it. I decided to go with an underleveled Amoonguss. It might be too strong for that point. They're, very bulky. Obviously, they can mess you up with status moves and effect spore and stuff, but it is incredibly slow. It doesn't have the highest attacking stats, so I think an underleveled Amoonguss wouldn't be too crazy. And lastly, Marlin. I never really liked Jellicent on him. I it just, especially in Black and White 2, where the previous gym leader still had Haxorus. Drayden dropped to the seventh gym, and then Marlin's ace is Jellicent. I it just never really it just never really felt impressive to me. I know they switched out Chantal's Jellicent for something else in this Elite Four, but considering in Black and White, Jellicent was just one of her Pokemon. Now Jellicent just, you know, being his ace as a final gym leader. If it was fifth or sixth, maybe I could hear an argument for it, but Jellicent being an eighth gym leader ace just never worked for me. So it's still not the most impressive, but I think Seismitoad works a little better, at least has a higher base stat total. Uh, I just feel like it fits his gym theme a little better with the lily pad motif they have going there than seeing as a frog. So yeah, it's not a perfect solution. And also another instance, just like with Beartic, where if this were a later gen, it would actually be even better since it did get, I believe it's attack stat buff by 10 points. So it's solid enough. Again, solid enough to be on Gets's team. So might as well be his ace. Now Kalos. So for Kalos, I did my best to give these gym leaders ace Pokemon that could Mega Evolve. It definitely wasn't perfect, but assume that in every instance where it's the fourth gym onwards. From the fourth gym onwards, if the ace Pokemon is not a Mega Pokemon, there is a Mega Pokemon somewhere on their team. So just, I might mention here and there where I think the ace Pokemon would be, but just generally speaking, from the fourth gym onwards, there is a Mega on their team if it is not their ace. So Viola. Viola is in a very unfortunate situation where, for whatever reason, they made a bug gym leader where there is exactly one new bug type. Not, oh, outside of special event Pokemon or legendaries or starters or like something, weird where it wouldn't work as a gym leader. No. The only new bug type line introduced in Kalos is Vivian. I know the dex is super small, but that's still weird to me. Probably could have been, helped by the fact that it definitely could have been helped by giving Gudra the bug typing. It's at least one of the secondary typings it could have had, but nope, Vivian's the only option. So because of that, I had to go with a previous gen bug type, and I felt like the best choice was Beedrill. It at least can Mega Evolve, so in a rematch you have a Mega Beedrill, but it's still just I didn't feel good about it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I was kind of stuck here. Like maybe Ariados, since her gym theming is a big spider web and it evolved pretty early, so it'd be fine. But yeah, I was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. I had to go with a previous gen bug type, and since Beedrill can Mega Evolve, I went with it. Grant. This is another instance of having two Pokemon that are both on kind of dual aces. Both Amora and Tyrant are both level 25, but since he sends out Tyrant second, and I think it's overall a little stronger, like at least a little more imposing anyway, I went with that as his ace. Solid, I think that works as a second gym ace. I think overall Rock could have benefited from going a little later, so that way Tyrantrum or even Barbarical, I think could have worked as a rock ace. I know it's the ace of Siebel, but I think it could work as a gym leader ace as well. And speaking of which, I think you switch him to the fifth gym and give him Mega Barbarical. Barbarical has always been one of those Pokemon that has been very close to the bottom of my Pokemon list as far as like favorite Pokemon of all time. I have never liked Barbarical. I just don't know what they're doing with this design. It weirds me out. But after playing Legend ZA and using a Barbarical on my team and having it Mega Evolve, and I really, really like this Mega Barbarical. Just something about it's one of those Megas where they took the elements of the base Pokemon and just exaggerated them to a point where I actually really, really like like this Barbarical. If Barbarical just looked like this all the time, I actually really like it, but it doesn't. So there you go. It also kind of fixes the a potential issue with giving Seabold a wanting to give Seabold a Mega Pokemon since Mega Barbarical is no longer a water type, it's now part fighting. It worked better as a rock ace. So move him to fifth and have him be a Mega Barbarical. Karina, Halucha is pretty iconic to her. I like it quite a bit here. I do have always personally preferred Pangoro. I know that's not really fair to say, oh, she should have used Pangoro because I like it. Like that's not really fair. I think it should be on her team somewhere, but regardless, I don't think Pangoro like fits her vibe better. Halucha definitely, I think, fits her vibe overall a little better anyway. But if you were to switch it out for something, Pangoro. And now, like I said, from this point on, if the Pokemon that I picked here is not in a Mega Evolution, assume there's a Mega Pokemon somewhere on the team. And for Ramos, whatever, Go-Go, very, very good Pokemon for him. It's one of those I'm kind of surprised hasn't gotten a Mega Pokemon or Mega Evolution, but regardless, it's actually like deceptively strong for this point in the game. But um, the only Pokemon that I thought would like really work for him outside of Go-Go would maybe be Gourgeist. Trevenant could also maybe work, but just the idea of him being like a gardener. I think him having a Pokemon that literally represents a plant that you harvest from a field. I think that works. And then probably his Mega would be Mega Victory Bell or something like that. All right, moving on to Clement. Heliolisk, pretty solid ace for him. I do feel like it's maybe just vibe-wise, a bit of a downturn from Go-Go. It definitely has a lower base stat total, but it has a good amount of speed, a good amount of special attack, so I think it worked for him. However, just like with Watson, there's basically no other option for him. The only other option for electric types in Kalos is Dedenne. So I think it makes just as much sense to have him move to the second gym and have Dedenne as his ace. You actually do go to Lumio City before, pretty much anywhere else anyway. So story-wise, kind of like with Fantina being the third gym in Platinum, where you go to Hardhome before, anywhere else, like you might as well go ahead and fight the gym leader while you're there. Abdidene be the ace. It's definitely not very strong, but it does have that new fairy typing. So, you theoretically wouldn't have fought a lot of fairy types up to that point. So you might get messed up by it. Maybe they can give it some like maybe Dazzling Gleam. I know that would come later with Valerie, but this I think it could work well enough if you had to switch it, but obviously Heliolisk works for him a little better. Speaking of Valerie, Sylveon is a solid ace for her. In my head, for whatever reason, I always just kind of like I've broken this more recently, but growing up, I always just kind of assumed that her ace was a Florges. I for some reason could never connect Sylveon to her. So I just am saying that Florges, should be her ace. It at least works just as well. So there you go. And obviously Mega Mawile. She should have always already had that. So there you go. Next, Olympia. Meowstic is just one of those ace Pokemon that I never felt worked. Like not only is Meowstic just not super good, you also fight it a lot of times leading up to this point. Your rival, depending, in either game, has a Meowstic. Obviously, in one game it's a male Meowstic, and she always has female. But in if you picked a male character and you're fighting Serena, Serena will have a female Meowstic. So by the time you get to her, the seventh gym leader, her ace is a Pokemon that you've been able to deal with several times already. So yeah, I really don't understand it. If it were the Mega Meowstic that is, currently in canon, that'd be a different story. Granted, that Mega Meowstic is kind of terrible. Its design is fine, but they've really screwed up with its ability being just trace where its ability is that it gets another person's ability. Like I feel that's a little bit of a cop out, especially since Alakazam is a Mega Alakazam is faster, stronger, and has the same ability. I just really don't know what they were doing with Meowstic, but regardless, a little bit of a tangent. I also feel they could have done a thing where male and female Mega Meowstic had different abilities. Like, if you're gonna give one of them a bad ability, if you're gonna have them both in their base forms have really good abilities with competitive and prankster respectively, or female having competitive, male having prankster, with either of them Mega Evolve and get a worse ability, I don't understand that. But regardless, I think she always should have had Malamar as her ace. But since Malamar can now Mega Evolve, might as well give her Mega Malamar. Now, Mega Malamar is another one of those Mega Pokemon that I think they absolutely screwed up on. Its highest stat being its special defense at 102. No, 112. I don't know, I think its attack stat is 102 and its special defense is like 120 something. Like it's really not very good. We still don't know its ability yet. It could be. amazing. We don't know that, but regardless, it does, it still has the stats of a sub-legendary at like 570 something, I think. So it still would work more or less as an ace of a seventh gem, but it's still not the most impressive Mega Pokemon. So lastly, Wolfric. Avalugg is about as good as you can do, especially since there weren't that many other ice type options. The only other ice type option you really could have used was Auroras, but you already had Amara be on Grant's team, and then Auroras was on the Champions team, although that didn't stop Hawlucha from being on Karina's team. So, yeah. I also think Avalugg fits Wolfric a little better, but Auroras, if you had to switch it, that's I think the most logical choice. And then his ace would be, I assume, the most logical choice would be Mega Abomasnow. All right, now Alola does not actually have gym leaders, and in most other videos like this, I would just say, oh, we're gonna skip them. They don't have gym leaders. That's fine, but you know, they do have the island kahunas and they fill a similar role. So I'm gonna work with those island kahunas and in a similar way here. So with Hala, we have Crab Brawler. Great choice here. Um, I just feel like it fits his personality very well at a deceptively high attack stat for this early on. So I don't think he should switch anything else. But if he were to switch anything else, I think Stuffle has a similar vibe as the first stage of a two-stage fighting type Pokemon. It has not, I don't think it has as high attack stat, but it's still pretty high for a first stage Pokemon. So I think that could work. Olivia, I have very mixed feelings about her Lycanroc. I like her Lycanroc in the initial Island Kahuna fight. It's her Elite Four member team Lycanroc that I really don't like since it's literally just the same Pokemon but higher level. I never really liked her being a Kahuna anyway. I like Hala since there's clearly more potential with this Crabrawler evolving into Crabominable. But Olivia, especially since there weren't that many rock types to choose from, it's not like, oh, Lycanroc is a stopgap for something better. It's just you just fight this Lycanroc again. But regardless, Lycanroc as the second Island Kahuna, I think works. But if you were to switch it out, Minior is kind of the only other option. I think that'd be a little too early for Shell Smash, although Ultra Sun and Moon did make every single major battle like insanely hard, so maybe they would go with Shell Smash. I don't know. It also would be kind of fun if they hard coded it to where it's not ever going to use its Z move until it comes out of its shell and actually gets stronger. I think that'd be kind of cool. I think that Z move would be a little wasted in its shield down forms or shields up in this form. So yeah, I think that'd be cool. Nanu, Alolan Persian is another instance where there aren't that many dark types to choose from. I do think Persian fits his vibe super well. So yeah, I think he should use it. But if you were to switch it out for something else, I think Alolan Muck is kind of the best option. Like it actually does hit a good bit harder and only has the one weakness with ground. So yeah, not only is it hitting harder with its Z move, it also isn't going to be weak to a lot of the other things that the rest of his team is weak to. So I think that works. Lastly, Hapu with Mudsdale. I really, really like her with Mudsdale. That is, I think, one of just the strongest pairings of Pokemon vibe-wise in the entire franchise. So I'm definitely not going to say you should take that away from her. But if you had to, I guess Palisand. The only other real choice here was Alolan Dugtrio, and I didn't really think that worked. So I went with Palisand. Next, Galar. And for this, I decided not to really care much about like forcing a Pokemon that had to Gigantamax. Uh, Either assume that it doesn't matter, or Gigantamaxing just isn't really a factor, or they all just Dynamax regularly. or any Pokemon that I pick gets a Gigantamax form. Just any one of those, whichever you think worked best. So Milo, Eldegoss is pretty good for this point in the game. It's actually the highest base set total of any first gym leader ace. It is also the highest level, so all that comes together very well for Eldegoss to make sense here. Although there weren't that many other grass options to choose from. In fact, the only other I think the only other ones period outside of the starter would be Flapple and Appleton, depending on the game. And I think that they are definitely too strong for uh for this early on. Them not being weak to fire, I think, is a bit of a problem, especially since outside of like maybe a max raid battle, if you get lucky and find a Pokemon that knows an ice move, they're going to be pretty hard to take down. But also, you know, since this is already the technically the strongest first gym anyway, might not make it a little harder. Nessa Dreadnought is a very good ace here. Um, I don't think you should switch it out for anything else. But if you were to switch it out, Barraskewda makes the most sense. Barraskewda also might even be a little too strong for this point. It has a just ludicrously high attack and speed stat. Yes, it's super frail, but it's so fast and hard and hit so hard, like you may not even get a chance to hit it with anything. So I think Dreadnought is the best choice, but Barraskewda also works. Kabu, Tinta fits his vibe very well. Um, it is definitely the best choice for him, especially since Colossal is the only other fire type option outside of technically Galarian Darmanitan, but that's only sometimes that's not working. So it is cool that these both can Gigantamax, but Scorch fits better. Bea, oh, why do you have Machamp? I really, really don't know why they prioritize both Machamp and Gengar for the next two, especially since those two are two of the most prolific Pokemon throughout the entire franchise. Like, why are we focusing on them as opposed to actually Galar Pokemon like Sirfetch'd? I know that Sirfetch'd is an evolved form of a regional variant, but it still is a Galarian Pokemon. If you do feel worried about her having a Galarian evolution for whatever reason, or regional evolution for whatever reason, Grapploct also just fits her vibe super well. Um, yeah, I think Sirfetch'd is the better Pokemon, but Grapploct fits the vibe that Machamp and her kind of go for. So either one could work. And then Alistair, same thing. I don't know why you have Gengar. I really wish you didn't. I really wish that either Cursula or Runerigus, one of them could get some more love here. I went with Cursula since Cursula and Sirfetch'd are version counterparts. They're also both evolutions of regional variants, so I just you know really like that parallel. But I think Poltegeist, yeah, could also work here. Opal, um, that thing, I can. That is one of the few Pokemon that, for whatever reason, Alcremie. That is one of the few Pokemon that I have a problem with. Like as far as the name, like I know every single Pokemon name by heart. It just that's one of the ones that like it takes a little bit longer to bring up. Heliolisk is another one that I sometimes struggle with. I don't know why. Whatever. Alcremie, it's pretty good. I really like its Gigantamax form. I do think vibe-wise, it's a little bit of a downturn from Sentinel Scorch into Machamp and or Gengar, but it's still a pretty solid Pokemon. Uh, but I think something like Galarian Rapidash could work very well. I mean, Rapidash's design, its coloring is identical to Opal's, so I feel like if that's not intentional, I don't know how that's not intentional. They're both have like pink and blue stripe color. So I think that could work. But if you feel a little weird about her ace being a Galarian variant, which I completely understand, uh, Hatterene also works just as well. They both also have the same coloring. Um, Yeah, I think that works. Gordy with Colossal, pretty solid. I feel like this is one of those instances where it was definitely the best choice since there weren't any other rock types that could Gigantamax um outside of Dreadnought, who we'll tease in just a second. But outside of that, this was the only other option, but I still feel like it doesn't really fit him super well. And I do kind of like the story. I don't know if this is intentional, but the idea of Gordy and Melanie basically, having this rivalry with Gordy's ace being both rock and fire to take on her ice types, but then her ace being ice and water. I dig that, but I don't like it enough to say that it really fits Gordy as an ace. I think Stonejenner just overall fits his vibe a little better. Plus, I think Stonejenner, uh, I just can imagine the really cool, like, Stonehenge inspired Gigantamax form. So I wish that existed, but since it doesn't, you know, whatever. But if you do want to give another Gigantamax form Pokemon, Dreadnought is now there for the taking since Nessa doesn't have one. So there you go. And then Melanie, Lapras, just like with Machamp and Gengar, it's so weird that this is the third Kanto Elite Four ace that is on a Galar gym leader. I don't know why they did that. There are a lot of really cool ice types in this region, just like how there's a lot of cool fighting and ghost types in the region they could have used as aces, but nope, they went back to Kanto for some reason. But whatever. Uh, I also went with two options here. The first one being Frostmoth. She's literally dressed to look like a Frostmoth, so plus I think Frostmoth realistically, like in my head, I kind of like feel like Frostmoth and Scorch should be counterparts. They're both, I believe they're both unique bug typings introduced in this game. I don't think there was a previous bug ice or bug fire type. No, well, Corona. There aren't that many. There definitely aren't that many of their typings. And I just feel like Frostmoth could also have a really cool Gigantamax form. I feel like it being a friendship evolution should warrant it being a little stronger as well. So, yeah, I think if they did position it as an ace of a gym leader, they would have allowed it to be a little better. But I also think Mr. Rhyme worked just as well as an ace Pokemon here. It definitely has a base set total that's closer to Lapras's. So, yeah, I think that probably works better as an ace, but Frostmoth fits her better. Piers, Obstagoon, literally perfect. He's literally dressed like one. So, yeah, you should not go with anything else. But if you had to, Grimmsnarl. Even though actually kind of fun that he doesn't use the Gigantamax, gimmick. So it'd be kind of fun if he had a Pokemon that does technically Gigantamax and he just doesn't do it. I think that'd be fun. But Obstagoon is his Pokemon for sure. And lastly, for this region, Raihan, Duraludon, it fits him super well. But the only other like dragon type options are Flapple Appleton and Dragapult. But I actually feel like Dragapult works super well here. First of all, I like the idea of since him and the champion have this rivalry, you know, him having the pseudo legendary Pokemon on his team to kind of try to rival him, just that feels very cool to me. Plus, since you fight him in a double battle and Dragapult's signature move Dragon Darts specifically works well in double battles, I think that's cool. It would definitely be super underleveled, but you know what? That's fine. I'll allow it this time. So yeah, I think Duraludon fits fine enough here, but lore wise, I feel like Dragapult honestly kind of works a little better, especially since it isn't the ace of any other major trainers. Lastly, Paldea. Paldea was definitely the most interesting one to do because all of them have ace Pokemon that are not of their region but terrestrialize into their type. Even though all of them have very, I feel, very logical choices for their Paldean aces. Most of them are on the team, but they really should have actually been their Pokemon, but whatever. Um, so for all of these, I decided just to keep it simple and just be I'm choosing a Pokemon that is of their type that is found in Paldea. So, first, Katie, I do really like Teddier. So some of these, the logic they had for their terrestrialization, I actually quite dig. Like if you had to have a previous gen Pokemon that turned into a bug type, Teddiursa, a Pokemon that is obsessed with honey, I really like that becoming a bug type. But Spidops, I think it's a logical choice here. Um, if Katie were fought any later, and I kind of like the idea um, potentially fighting these gym leaders in any order. I didn't. I At one point I considered being like, oh, here's what they would have if you fought them last or first, but not all of them had a ton of options to do that with. So I only did that for the first two, just because I felt like that was just I don't know, the most interesting ones to work with. So if Katie were fought first, Spine Ops definitely would be the ace. But if we're fought any later, uh, Low Kicks is kind of the definitely the best bug type introduced in the region. It's definitely not like a great Pokemon, but it's one of those, later gen min-max Pokemon that has a pretty low base size total, but it put them in stats that worked for it. So yeah. Brassius, Sudowoodo being a grass type, phenomenal. Like that, it's almost like they made Trudeau Wudo and worked backwards from there, making all the other gym leaders have a gimmick like that. But if it were to actually be a Paldean Pokemon, Bramblegast just makes so much sense for him. Um, Weirdly enough, he never actually ever uses Bramblegast on any of his teams. Not his regular team, not his rematch, not his post-game DLC rematch, never. Even though he has spikes all over his body, he never uses Bramblegast. I I don't know, but it works super well for him. But Arboliva also works super well. Um, I feel like Brambleghast fits his vibe better, but Arboliva is a much better Pokemon overall. Iodo, in theory, I like the idea of what they were going for here, where they had a levitate Pokemon terrestrialize into a electric type, so it basically has no weaknesses. I feel like Miss Magius just doesn't really fit her vibe well at all. I don't know. I There weren't that many other. I don't think there were really any other good levitating Pokemon to pull from anyway, but I don't know. This one just didn't really like I like it in theory, but I feel Miss Maggie specifically just doesn't work for her. But Belly Bolt, I think, fits her vibe super well. Plus, it would, I think, take advantage of terrestrialization even better than pretty much any other Pokemon out this entire list because not only are you getting the two times a boost to your electric moves, you're also getting a boost from your ability, which makes your next electric move even stronger. And since it is so slow, it's going to be hit once and fire back with just incredibly powerful thunderbolts or volt switches or whatever. Kofu, Harbounable, that's a pretty good one. I like the idea where there's a lot of other crab Pokemon that are water types, and when people saw a Crabrawler, they assumed it was or was going to be a water fighting type, but no, uh, fighting ice. But you know, I think there maybe even could have been a couple of other better options to do that with, and there are also just a ton of really good water types in this region he could have pulled from. And I think the one that fits him the best is Tatsugiri. I know that Tatsugiri is one of the Titan Pokemon, but I'm ignoring that. Just like with other major trainers, I'm ignoring like totems and Titans and that kind of thing. Since he is a chef, I think it'd be very fun if his ace Pokemon were a Pokemon that's literally sushi. So I think that's fun. You could have also done Veluza here. His, cat phrase literally includes Veluza in it, but it's also like a food type Pokemon. But Tatsugiri I saw that and was like, oh, that's perfect. So there you go. Larry, I really like Staraptor as his ace here. Like, it's actually a normal type for one. This is the only gym leader that actually has their ace Pokemon be their type. It's not a Paldean Pokemon, but it still is a normal type, so that you give it points there. Plus, it references the fact that he is also the Flying Elite Four member, so that's really cool. If there was a better normal flying type than Squawkabilly, I would have put it as his ace, but since there's not, the Dunsparce. I just feel like the Dunsparce just fits his vibe super well anyway. So yeah, plus using Hyper Drill with that, two times boosted Terastallize boost, I think that'd be that's pretty cool. Now for Rhyme, Toxtricity, solid Pokemon. It, fits her singer, performer vibe well, but outside of Hex, it doesn't really learn any ghost type moves, so I wish it could capitalize on that a little better. But regardless, Houndstone, like it's weird to me that that was never her race. Like you could have gone Ledge, but I think Houndstone just, it is it's it just feels like it always should have been her Pokemon. Like with her like her bone aesthetic and just with the during the fight when like all those Grievards kind of pop up, like it just makes sense for Houndstone to be your ace, but oh well. Next up, Tulip, Florges. Florges definitely fits her vibe well. I, it's kind of fun that her ace is a fairy type that tears into a psychic type, so that way it can hit dark types with fairy moves. I guess that's interesting, but this is another region with just a lot of really, really good psychic type Pokemon, and the gym leader doesn't really capitalize on it. So you could go Armor Rouge, you could even go Veluza, like I said earlier, Rabsca, but Farigiraf absolutely should have been her ace. If she was a little earlier, maybe you could get away with the Roadrunner one, who I'm blanking on right now, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But especially as the seventh ace, um, for a giraffe works super well. And lastly, Grusha. I have never really understood Altaria as his ace. Like, I guess it kind of looks like a snow cloud. It can learn Ice Beam. So I guess Espathra. Yeah, it came to me. Sorry. Espathra is the Roadrunner Psychic type that could work as earlier, but sorry, I just had to get that other. Anyway, yeah, especially like Altaria just never really felt like a eighth gym's ace. It definitely feels like a downturn from the previous ones. Like Fleur just has a way higher base stat total, and Altaria isn't bad. It just doesn't really feel like a ace Pokemon, and I don't really feel like it utilizes the like ice theming as well as it could. Like I don't really know what they're going for here. Especially when Titan just that is a eighth gym ace right there. Like that is the vibe I'm looking for with an ace Pokemon, especially one this late in the game. So it always should have been Titan. I don't know why it was Altaria, but there you go. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought about any of the new aces that I chose here. Are there any that you think I was way off on? Are there any Pokemon I completely forgot about? Do you agree or disagree with any of the ones where I said that, I actually do like the aces or I think they should switch, etc.? Yeah, please let me know all that down below, as well as any other future ideas for other videos. Yeah, I love to have discussions about all that. So with that, I'll see you all next time.